So the big question going into qualifying was whether or not Red Bull could turn it around. They didn't have a good day on Friday, a lot of bouncing, a lot of oversteer, quite spectacular to watch. And on Saturday morning, it wasn't a lot different. Max complaining on the radio a lot about bouncing, lack of grip, oversteer. Fabulous to watch. In a way, I was kind of hoping that it would stay that way because we don't often see Max in full-blooded opposite lock slides, admittedly coming out of slow corners. We're not talking about high-speed drifts here, but very, very impressive to watch that. Lando Norris, too, in the McLaren. Amazing car control through the medium speed change of direction corners as well. Nothing like as much grip on the McLaren when they were taking wing off the car. So going into qualifying, it was a big question about whether Red Bull would have got it right, had got it right, and whether they had to compensate and take some of their top speed out of the car. Well, they did an amazing job because they kept their top speed, as it turned out, for qualifying, and they matched McLaren where they needed to on the slow speed and medium speed corners, sectors 1 and 3. And Max Verstappen got the pole. He got the pole on his first lap in Q3 on a new set of tyres. He had 2 new sets available for Q3, unlike his opposition in Q3, which had to run a scrub set on the first run, and Max was in that position because he only ran 1 set of tyres in Q1, and he was unbelievably quick on the straight through sector 2. So 330 kilometers an hour compared with 323, 322 for McLaren. Multiply that by the amount of time they're on the throttle, and there's your pole position for Max Verstappen. And he also got the pole on his second lap, just a shade ahead of Charles Leclerc, who picked up the Ferrari by the shoelaces on a new set and did the most exquisite lap. He looked fabulous, actually, on his first lap with nothing like as much grip on the scrubbed Pirelli softs. Just phenomenal car control and positioning as well. And I was thinking of Gilles Villeneuve, actually, after that lap, because Gilles once said to my colleague Nigel Roebuck, there must be something wrong in Formula One when you lose time going sideways. This was when tyres were evolving and you could get away with power slides and you weren't subject to tyre deg, and it looked spectacular and it was quick, and that was Gilles' era. And then it all went away, of course. You have to be in a straight line, have to keep everything linear. And I think that's what Charles was feeling at the end of that first lap on those scrub tyres, because he was just millimetre perfect. And it would have felt like a really quick lap. And I can imagine how he felt when he discovered he was like P7 or something, because he was doing all that on a relatively low level of grip. But then the new tyres came and we saw the best from Charles again, just a fabulous lap. McLaren's excellent performance from the McLarens, continuing to show up the factory Mercedes team. I'm surprised that Mercedes have renewed their engine supply contract to McLaren through to, I don't know, whatever it is, 2030 or something. Yeah, right. Is that I guess they're thinking, well, at least we're going to have a Mercedes out there doing well, and we should be doing quite well too. Anyway, putting that to one side, really good job by McLaren to sustain that sort of competitive edge we've seen since the second half of the year began. And for Oscar to out-qualify Lando the way he did was, well, I said yesterday how impressive he looked in the car. Yes, he's in his rookie season, but I've said all year long that having somebody as good as Oscar in that car, we're going to see a lot more from him, obviously, and as the McLaren gets better and better, and it's a good car now. We saw Oscar being self-critical, being very aware of his own driving errors, but getting on top of it and putting in a great lap right at the end. And by contrast, the better Oscar is getting on any given weekend, the more it affects Lando Norris. As I've been saying, ever since Oscar Piastri signed to drive for McLaren, it's not going to get the best from Lando Norris. This isn't what he needs in the other car. And I'm sure McLaren don't even think about that, because they think, wow, we got 2 great racing drivers and Lando's our guy and Oscar's our guy. But they're not getting the best from Lando Norris with Oscar there, for sure. And it showed today, I think, in Q3. I think Lando was on his limit, but his limit is slightly longer corners than Oscar Piastri. And that's where Oscar is going to have it over Lando when the car is good. And at the moment, nobody at McLaren seems to be showing the way to Lando Norris. There was an interesting comment just on that in the F2 sprint race today, when the race engineer for Enzo Fittipaldi, when he was leading the race, got on the radio and said, just for information, Enzo, turn 9, Frederic Besti's taking a much tighter line than you, using less road as a result. And I just thought, does he really think in the middle of a race that any driver can start thinking, oh yeah, I should take a tighter line there? It's nothing about line, as I've said a million times. It's all about manipulating the car for a shorter corner, from the millisecond you touch the brake pedal till you got the car straight in the middle of rotation. And you can't just suddenly come in on a tight line. All he's going to do is go slower. You've got to have all the other things that go with it. You've got to have the decreasing brake pedal pressure against increasing steering load and all the other great things that the great drivers have, and the suppleness in which they can do that. And that is something that Oscar Piastri has been born with, and it's not something that Lando Norris has ever really had in his vocabulary as a driver. He's got a million other things, and he's really, really good in so many ways, but he doesn't have that. And that is going to be the problem. And that's what we saw today in the car, the difference between Oscar and Lando today around Abu Dhabi. So Lando won't be happy with P5. He'd been right up there, potentially vying for the pole going into Q3. But much more importantly, slower than his teammate, and that will be really eating at him. George Russell living up to his name, like a sort of Jack Russell, unbelievably quick and darty around Abu Dhabi. No real power slides from George Russell. It was all just boom, 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 just fabulous. No margin for error at all. Pretty spiky driving, but right on the edge of the tyres and what the tyres could do for that rather unwieldy Mercedes. Can I say unwieldy? I think I can, because Lewis Hamilton didn't even get through into Q3. Very, very disappointed, very disillusioned. Very sad to see. Sad to see Lewis walking down the pit lane after Q2, going down to the weighbridge, getting weighed. I mean, this isn't what Formula One needs. This isn't what Lewis Hamilton needs. Obviously, all his motivation and all his hope is based on the 2024 Mercedes. So from his point of view, let's hope it is a good car. But very sad to see Lewis in that situation. And I think you can trace it back really to not running in FP1 on Friday. It was a relatively difficult weekend for Mercedes to get the car absolutely right. We know how small their operating window is. And Lewis never seemed to be within that window. He wasn't bad in third practice today in FP3, but he was always a sort of run behind George Russell. If George found a few tenths, Lewis would do so on the next run, and he just ran out of time. And that was, in my opinion, the result of losing FP1. He needed that time. You need that time in a car that is so knife-edgy to drive. You need to be able to see where it's going to go if you make various changes or do various things with the steering, brakes and the throttle. And brings me back to my point. I think they should have spare cars in Formula One. I think the young drivers shouldn't be limited to just a couple of outings. I think there should be a spare car available for young drivers to use on Fridays if the teams want to do that. And I think the spare car should be available for race situations on Sunday if there's a drama. I would just love to see the balance sheet convincing me that that is ridiculously expensive and terrible for the show and not the way Formula One wants to go. I think, as I said in a live stream, we need to bring back spare cars. I've said it a million times. I know it's falling on deaf ears, but I'm going to continue to say it because I think it's a great loss for Formula One not to have them. Yuki Tsunoda, excellent job for AlphaTauri. Really showed up Daniel Ricciardo around Abu Dhabi. I mean, why? I mean, that's the question. This should be a good circuit for Daniel Ricciardo. And the car is obviously good. But Yuki Tsunoda all over him, so all credit to him. And he kept up that pace throughout qualifying as well. Daniel didn't make it out of Q2 when he was 0.2 slower than Tsunoda. Fernando Alonso 7th, 0.3 quicker than Lance Stroll in Q2. Stroll didn't get out of Q2, so a consistently strong performance from Fernando Alonso in qualifying. Nico Hülkenberg moved mountains for Haas Ferrari to get into Q3 after that shunt he had yesterday. Kevin Magnussen didn't even get out of Q1. And Sergio Perez 24-1 against Max Verstappen's 23-4. Yeah, traffic and everything else has to be taken into account. But Sergio not slow in a straight line either. 3.29, a kilometre or two quicker than Charles Leclerc. Yeah, a little bit slower than Max Verstappen, but a really impressive performance by Red Bull to be so quick on the straight, but still to be quick enough through sectors 1 and 3, still to be able to do the lap. What a great racing car that RB19 is. The big surprise of qualifying was Carlos Sainz not getting out of Q1 for Ferrari. Traffic, yeah, for sure that was an issue, but also the track did seem to go quick, slow. Remarkably, FP3 was very quick when George Russell was out. And then about 5 minutes later, when Leclerc and Max Verstappen were out, it seemed to be about half a second slower. So there is quite a lot of variation. Carlos didn't get a good lap at the end. I have to say, probably his confidence is shot a little bit. I mean, if you have the manhole cover come up under your car, flat out in top gear in Las Vegas, and then you have a big shunt in the S's in Abu Dhabi, then possibly you're going to be a little bit away from your 100% best. Like Lando, Carlos suffers, in my opinion, from having longer corners than his teammate. And until either driver really understands that. It's always going to be difficult because comparing telemetry and comparing braking points and looking at power application points and minimum speeds is not going to give them the answer. And that's why on a fairly regular basis, you see drivers like Carlos and Lando a little bit frustrated when they are slower than their teammates. Congratulations to Frederik Vesti for winning that F2 sprint race today. He is a very, very good short corner driver. And congratulations, of course, to Max Verstappen on yet another pole position for Red Bull, making it look easy at the end, but it was a difficult build-up to qualifying. And Red Bull, again, just using their nous, using their racing feel, getting the car absolutely right when it mattered. If this was a sprint race, I think it would be a very different story. I don't think they would have got it right after first practice on Friday. But nonetheless, it isn't a sprint race. It is a proper Grand Prix. And we look forward to that tomorrow. Big thanks to Jetcraft, to Pitbox.io, to you, the viewer, for watching. Take care. See you tomorrow.